I was in touch with lots of other people writing the fanzines, and we used to exchange stuff. So they would send me their fanzine, I would put it in the local shops. I would send them my fanzine, they would put it in their local shops. So you had an informal distribution network, and then you had mail order operations. Some of them were like rough trade. They had advertised in the back of the music papers. Others were much more smaller level, and they'd sell cassettes as well, of course. So there was a little network that started to form there. So you gradually expanded out from your local town to the next town, and then Tower Records decided to take some, so they got them into the States as well. And Rough Trade took some, and they had a store in San Francisco, so they went over there. And then I used to post them to places in Australia and places all over Europe as well.
It's a self-contained recording studio designed to give the enthusiast access to some of the basic features of the real thing, but in a manageable, miniature package. Some big studios these days handle as many as 40 separate tracks. This studio in miniature offers just 4. It records onto a conventional cassette of tape, but it runs at twice the normal speed.
The technology revolution that was gathering momentum during the 80s created more means of production for recording artists in the Tascam Porter Studio, a portable 4-track cassette recorder which brought the possibilities of a small recording studio to the bedrooms of underground musicians around the world. I've had a couple of conversations with some artists about the cassette 4-track. Do you ever see those, the Tascam 244?
I bought one in 1981. I got the TIAC 4-track cassette. Yeah.
Yeah. What a revolutionary, piece of technology that was.
That's how we started recording lots of demos, and our early cassette releases were on that. Because I used to put the tapes backwards sometimes, and then do. I remember getting a recording of Marianne. She sang something on a regular cassette, and I turned it backwards into the 4-track, and it was half speed because the 4-tracks ran at double, didn't they? And so it was like a really strange vocal, and and then I added things to it, and there's a track called Marianne's Dream, which is that's how I did it. In 83, we did an album with a band from Seattle called Audio Letter, and basically it was with 4-track tapes. So I guess we must have just written letters then. I don't know, it's crazy actually. So we used to record something on a 4-track and then send it to each other, and then the other band would finish it off. We'd use 2 tracks. They'd use 2, but we did that and then released that. So that was really cool to do, and do a collaboration with a band from Seattle.
Isn't it time you explored a new frontier?
Read Dianetics by L. Ron Hubbard. The adventure is waiting for you wherever paperbacks are sold.
I'm going to be praying for a mighty spiritual revival. And just pick a time, say, God, what time? Some of it, we're going to show you something about an alarming development in music that has come over to us from England called punk rock.
Around the same time, the Wild Planet column started to review the new wave of... It was like punk mixed with industrial and just creative, really. It didn't really have a strict genre. Through that, I remember writing to some of the bands and got to know Ed Caspell from the legendary Pink Dots. And then there was people starting labels like Gary Livermore started Third Mind Records. He did a fanzine before he did that called Tone Deaf. And he did, you probably heard of the Rising from the Red Sand collection. There was 5 cassettes. We were on 3 volumes of that.
That was like a landmark release, I would say.
Yeah. And they would sell a lot. They'd do at least 500 copies of each one, or maybe 1,000. And so he made a bit of money off the tapes and decided to do vinyl then. So he did it. He did like Nurse with Wound and quite experimental stuff. So then he asked us to do an album, and our first album, the first Attrition vinyl, came out in 1984. And but he thought it was quite commercial because it compared to the other bands it was, but it wasn't really. My friend Alan did Adventures in Reality tapes, and he did the Last Supper cassette. That had SPK on, actually, in Test Department, and we were on it. And I think he sold 2,000 of that.
The first edition was only like 100 copies that was done, which I copied myself at home. And then I took them down to Rough Trade Records in London, and they just said, yeah, we'll have these, because it had like, SPK Test Department and people that they knew on it. And they said, and we'll have another 500, please. And I went, okay. So I went back to Coventry and went, there's no way I'm ever going to...
You're going to do tape-to-tape copies for 500.
Yeah, I was copying them in real time, so you can imagine how long that took just to do hundreds. So I just went and borrowed some money off my parents and went to a commercial cassette producer that could do these things at quantity. Got it all, went into a studio, got it mastered onto reel-to-reel, because I needed it on reel-to-reel, and took it in there and got like 1,000 done. Took the 500 down to Rough Trade. They sold them all, and then there's some more, and then we did some more. So it sold a lot, and because it was produced with this what they call on-body printing, where it's printed on the side of a cassette, it meant that, and Rough Trade were doing it. It got into record shops all over the world. So cassette, they had lots of cassettes in record shops at the time, old racks of them. So it was in there, which meant that it sold, a lot. There was a few licensing arrangements with different countries for people to do versions of it as well. It's never been reissued on CD or record or anything. It's only ever been that cassette. The last issue of the fanzine proper was The Last Supper, had a booklet with it. And that was basically the last issue of the fanzines. They were alphabetically numbered. That was issue L.
The biggest question that I wanted to ask you around that Last Supper release is, I was just looking it up, and I found a little scan of something that must have been put in there that talks about a ZX Spectrum program being on the cassette as well as music.
You could load computer programs off cassettes in those days. So if you plugged it into your ZX Spectrum, which a lot of people had, or ZX81, you could download this program. And we coded a little, it's a catalogue. It's like a list of the releases, so that you could download those, and it made this kind of screeching noise.
So that's when it sort of blossomed, if you like. We were on there's an album called the Elephant Table album that was a spin-off of the Wild Planet articles, and Dave Henderson put together a double album of, all the bands like Pink Dots and Attrition and Coil, the first Coil track, Portion Control, Nurse with Wind, all these bands. That was great. So, and then that was the first track I had on vinyl in late 83. I remember showing it to a friend in the street. I was so excited.
The distribution network that Martin and Alan talk about was called The Cartel, a cooperative of small independent record labels who pooled their resources to create a network enabling wide distribution of their releases. The architect of The Cartel was Richard Scott of London's Rough Trade. The network brought UK independent music to stores around the world, running throughout the 80s and finally ceasing business at the end of that decade.
It was a good network then, because Rough Trade Records would distribute, and then they teamed up with local independent distributors around the country. There was Red Rhino and Bax. So the independent network could compete with the majors because they had lots of independents getting together. It was really exciting actually those days. In fact, I think a lot of the sales for this sort of music did better in Europe. When we got our first 12-inch single, which was early 84, we did a split record with a Swiss band called Shaman and Circle. But we got these big screen printed covers that, because it's 12-inch record, you can imagine it folded around about 3 times. So I got this big roll of printed covers came from Switzerland, and we spent ages. We had to fold them and number them, and we'd all over the living room floor, the whole band, doing we had 1,000. It's so it was all that hand done thing was wonderful actually. Our song was Monkey in a Bin, and on that split 12-inch, and John Peel played it, and I found a recording of him introducing us, played it recently.
This next is Monkey in a Bin, which sounds like the kind of thing that you can probably buy to eat in Covent Garden, and it's by Attrition from Recording Union, which is it's a 12-inch single or 12-inch EP, and on the other side of it, some tracks by, I think, a Swiss band whose name I almost certainly can't pronounce. Let's listen to it.
Lean to the right, have a good in the heart.